Well, that was just about the most expensive Voss commercial I've ever seen.
Well, that was a movie.
Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on Smile 2, which is, of course, the sequel to Smile, both of which were written and directed by Parker Finn. And this one has a brand new cast. Should have checked this ahead of time. Good job, Simon. This one is starring Naomi Scott as Sky Riley, who is like a pop singer in this universe. She, of course, is now the new victim of the Smile Demon, or whatever it's called. So I was a really big fan of the first Smile. I thought it was extremely creepy and eerie. A lot of people complained about the ending, and you know, I get it. The ending has kind of like it devolves into the CGI monstrosity thing that modern horror always seems to do. But the first 90% of the movie I loved. I thought it was extremely effective in the creepiness of it, you know, creatively. I know it was from the vein of like It Follows, where it's like this entity that is creeping you out and you know, coming for you, and only you can see it. And I get that it borrowed a lot from It Follows, but I thought it was so much better than It Follows, because It Follows never remotely kind of creeped me out at all. I thought I don't know, it just didn't work for me. I thought it was good, not great. Smile, I really loved because the creepiness just genuinely worked for me, and I don't get creeped out all that easily by horror movies, but I thought the way they did it and the stylism of it was so good. I pointed out in my review of that, like the little things like being on a phone call with 911 and then being like, "Are you alone?" And you're like, "Yes." Like, "Are you sure? Turn around." Like, that moment was so creepy to me, and I was giddy about the moments like that. So I was excited for this. You know, initially my reaction when I heard they were making another one was like, well, why? You know, you don't need another one. But I mean, why not? If you want to do more of the story with new victims, just it's another chance for more scares. It's horror. It's not about going somewhere new necessarily with the story. It's about doing it again, having fun with it again. And so that's what this was. The twist being, it is now a famous person. It's a celebrity, a pop singer, versus, you know, a doctor or a psychiatrist or whatever she was in the first one. It's just, you know, a normal person, an everyday person. And so with that allows for some different twists to it. You know, she's out in public more. She's being viewed by a lot of strangers that all want to be close to her. So which ones can you trust? Which ones can't you? And so it allowed for more of that. It allowed for more different takes of the same kind of scares. And I will say, this movie is better in some ways and worse in some ways. How is it better? One, the whole movie, the franchise, both movies, it's an allegory, you know, it's an allegory for trauma or depression or an amalgamation of those things. It's just, you know, psychological, mental health stuff, and you know, the suicidal tendencies are the monster, essentially. It's trying to get you to kill yourself due to the trauma or the post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever you've gone through. In, you know, in the first one, it's being a psychiatrist, an ER psychiatrist. You see some messed up shit. In this, being a celebrity and going through different things, like she was a drug addict and she's now clean, and you know, she saw her boyfriend die in front of her in a car accident that she feels partially responsible for. So there's different things that, you know, are traumatic in her life, and that's the allegory of it, is those moments, those things haunt you forever. And so this movie really leaned into, more so than the first one from what I remember. I haven't rewatched that real recently. It's probably been almost a year since I saw it. It leans more into the relatability and the sadness of that. You know, it really was impactful to me how much I felt sorry for the main character and what she was going through, more so in this than the first one. The first one, I was concentrated mostly on the scary stuff. This one, I was like, man, yeah, like, the mental health stuff is very believable, very relatable, it's conveyed extremely well. And so I spent more of the movie sad than scared, because on the flip side, the scares weren't as good in this one, in my opinion. They weren't terrible, but there was nothing that lived up to the best moments of the first one. I thought the first one had some really legitimately chilling moments, and this one had a couple of good moments. There were some visuals. I think there was a bigger budget involved because a lot of the effects looked better. The movie overall just felt better made. There's still, unfortunately, again, the cheesy bad effects at the end of this movie. They definitely leaned into it less than the first one. I'm sure you heard some criticism and wanted to avoid it somewhat, but it's still there. It's still used, and it's not good again. But overall, I think the effects, due to the budget, were better from what I remember. You know, the more practical effects, the CGI isn't good, and in fact there's some practical effects that aren't so good in this either. But overall, I felt like it was a better made movie than the first one, but it also just wasn't as scary. Part of that is trying to, you know, you're working in a box here. You already used a lot of your, if not your best ideas in the first one, and now you're tasked to try it again without any new outlet. Like, obviously the situation's different, but it's still the same villain, it's still the same type of scares. How can you outdo yourself? That's the task, and I don't feel like they did. I think the first one was creepier in every way. This one had some good moments, but the scares were not why I would say I enjoyed the movie. The scares were a means to an end in this one, as opposed to the appeal of the first one. So I did enjoy myself a lot. Like I said, there was that ending moment again that was disappointing again, but I enjoyed the plot, I enjoyed the story, and there was an overall uneasiness throughout the whole movie that was palpable. This also had one of the most painfully awkward scenes I've ever seen in a movie, intentionally, and that was done expertly. And once again, that leaned more into the feeling sorry and the sympathetic feelings that welled up while watching it. You know, there was a scene where I didn't want to watch because I was just like, oh, this is so painful, like in an awkward way, or just oh man, I feel bad for her way. Not like grisly, gory stuff I can't watch. It was just I don't want to watch because I'm getting secondhand embarrassment kind of thing, because you know what she sees is not what everybody else sees. That's, you know, the whole thing. And the way that it was going, I was like, I don't want to watch this. So I thought it was well made. I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, I definitely think the first one, obviously also, you give it bonus points for being original. It was the first entry into the franchise, so it's like you kind of enjoy it more for being the first one. This one, it lacked, you know, as much originality. It also lacked as many good scares, and it was better made. You know, I think also another problem with the first ones, it felt like they ran out of steam near the end, even before the bad effects start popping up. It just felt like, okay, where do we go from here? This movie never really felt like that. The ending was kind of contrived a little bit, but not as much as the first one. So overall, better written, honestly, probably better directed, better acted. I really liked the girl in this movie. I thought she was fantastic. I don't know. I definitely enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to people, but I still think I enjoyed the first one more, simply because even though this movie was good, it was well made. If it's not scary and it's a horror movie, then what's really the point of it? Yes, there's a good allegory, there's a good story, and the scares aren't terrible. They're still pretty good, but like, I would rather recommend the first one to people than the second one. Obviously, it's because it's the first one in a way, but like, even if these were two separate franchises that had nothing to do with each other, I'm just going based on quality, not what order you're supposed to watch it in. I would be much more likely to recommend the first one to people than the second one, because the scares are just better in the first one, and ultimately, that's what matters the most in horror movies. It's just like a comedy, you know, if the movie's funnier, I'm gonna recommend it. Even if the plot doesn't make as much sense, who cares? It's a comedy, you know? So that's kind of how I felt about this, is that I enjoyed it a lot. I would still give it a positive rating, but like, I'm pretty sure the first one made my top 10 list that year. I don't remember exactly where it ended up, but I enjoyed that movie. I showed it to people, and I had a lot of fun with it. I would still probably watch this movie with friends, but like, I'm not eager. I'm not, hey, you have to watch this, because I don't feel that way. I thought it was good. You know, I'd give it a 6.5, something like that. It was fun. It was fine. The scares were okay. The plot was very interesting. You know, I felt it was impactful. It was cool to see a celebrity, somebody like that, go through something like this. Like I said, I felt very emotional during this movie, but overall, that's not the main allure of a horror movie to me. Yes, I care about the allegory and I want it to make sense and I want it to be relatable and well told, but ultimately I want the scares to take the front focus, and I felt like a lot of scares were either repetitive, lesser versions of the first one, or just not as good as the first one. Like, the best scare in this movie had to do with a guy taking his clothes off in a hallway, and I thought that was really good, but like, I compared that moment, which was good, to the best moments of the first one. It's not comparable. The first one was so much scarier. So I do like it, I do recommend it, but it's not as good as the first one. I don't think that's a controversial opinion to have. It's just not as good as the first one, but still worth a watch if you're a big fan of the franchise, if you're a big fan of the idea, want to see how they use the allegory this time. Do recommend it, but yeah, the first one was definitely better. So that's what I did think. What did you guys think, though? If you've seen it, let me know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. There's a lot of product placement for Voss. A lot. She drinks like a full bottle of Voss in almost every scene, and they write it into the plot. They try to make it make sense, but it's just Voss in every scene. It's ridiculous. It made me laugh because it just kept happening, and it's a lot of water. Voss bottles are big. The only time she doesn't drink the whole thing is when it matters for the plot. She drinks half of it and then puts it on the counter so it can be knocked off later. And it's like, okay, we get it. Voss paid you for this movie. Cool, but like, really? Can we just calm down a little bit?